Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so very much for spending this afternoon with us. I know that there are many World AIDS Day activities that are occurring, but I promise you, none will be as rewarding as spending this hour with our dear friend, Mr. Phill Wilson. So Phill, welcome, and thank you so much for joining with us.
Well, it is my pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me to join you. I have been really looking forward to today and looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely, and I'm certain that those who have joined in that they are looking forward to hearing from you as well. And I will say that as we continue with our conversation, that if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use your chat feature, and we will make sure that we try to address as many of your questions as possible. So, Phil, you were the center of the senior citizen social media, aka Facebook, this weekend, when people saw that you were speaking on today. So, the number one question is, isn't he retired? And so you already know we got to come out the gate and talk about your retirement. Just share a little bit with us just about what you've been doing while you've had this season of rest and yeah, and welcome back. Welcome back. I think I can say that. Welcome back.
Well, thank you very, very much. And it has been really wonderful to step back for a little while. In January, it will have been 2 months since I stepped back from active HIV/AIDS work when I retired from the Black AIDS Institute. And during the last 2 years, a lot has happened. For all of us, the last year, a lot has happened with the pandemic and certainly with the strange things that have been emanating from the White House, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For me personally, to kind of be transparent, I stepped back for a number of reasons. One, as I said actually in my last talk that I gave at the U.S. Conference on AIDS, back when it was the U.S. Conference on AIDS, now it's the U.S. Conference on HIV and AIDS. But as I said, there comes a time when the baton has to be handed off. There comes a time when people need to make room and space for other leadership to grow. And I felt like at the end of 2018, the time was right for me, that I felt very strongly that, particularly from a day-to-day leadership perspective, that the movement needed new leaders, new talents, new skills to move us forward. And there were things that I felt that I did not know. And there are things that I felt were going to be necessary moving forward that I did not want to learn. So that was kind of my professional reason for stepping back. On a personal level, I have been in the forefront of this battle basically since the very, very, very beginning. I actually remember when the first MMWR came out in 1981. I actually came out as a gay man in 1980 and started my first relationship. And I remember those early discussions, and I got actively involved in fighting and working on various levels, initially as a volunteer in HIV and AIDS as early as 1982. And worked on various levels, a local level, a state level, a national level. I worked in prevention, I worked in awareness, education, and policy, in training, all of those areas. I worked in the private sector, in the public sector, and levels of government. So I had a broad swath of experience that I am very, very grateful to have been able to offer. but there was a price to pay, I think, in that process. You know, the
Mhm.
price of being so active while actually in the middle of it. And like the hair care club for men, where the guy says, you know, I am also a client. Now, as a person, as a person living with HIV and eventually living with AIDS, and having lost so many people to the epidemic, and not having had time to process that grief. And I think that there are many of us who shared that experience, that we neither had the luxury or, quite frankly, the desire to pause and process the unimaginable amount of grief that we were experiencing, particularly in the early days of the epidemic. And so that was a sacrifice that I felt that I needed to address in my personal life. I also, you know, am the son of older parents. I've been very, very blessed to have older parents, and I saw the time, you know, ticking, and I wanted time to have unencumbered time with my parents, you know, at this time. And I'm very, very, very grateful that I've had, you know, the kind of unencumbered time with my mother and my father. And sadly, we lost my mom in July, and I'm very grateful that I had the time with her over the course of my life. You know, my mother had a chance to see a full-on lived experience for her oldest son, you know, from birth to early childhood to, you know, teenage years and adult years. And quite frankly, as I say to people all the time, you know, I got to be an old man with my mom. I'm spending a lot of time living in that gratefulness, addressing the grief, of course. You know,
Right.
they don't. There's no manual that helps you understand what happens to you when you lose a parent. Um, I am
Right.
fortunate, as I live in my gratefulness and my thankfulness, that I still have my dad, and so I've been spending a lot of time with him, and we have had a great time, kind of hanging out together and helping each other as we process our grief. So a lot has happened since I stepped back in 2018 in my life. A lot has happened in the movement. A lot of exciting
Right.
things have happened in the movement, that the movement has matured in ways that I'm not sure we envisioned would happen. No, in 19, no, I mean in 2017 and 18 when I was contemplating my retirement, and in 2018 when I finally did.
Well, first off, so sorry for your loss. I know that you were very close with your mom, and she truly was the biggest cheerleader of the Black AIDS Institute. And it speaks volumes to your commitment, but also to your parents and investing in your vision. And so I do want to share those condolences publicly. But as you talked about our movement, you talked about 2020, and we know that this year has truly been one for the history books. From a pandemic to an uprising, and still knowing that HIV work must go on. So just kind of help us make sense of this year, you know, through your eyes, and just kind of how you see this perfect storm, if you will, of many social and health and environment, a whole host of changes that's occurring.
Well, you know, the interesting thing, and I would say certainly as I personally reflect on 2020, that without a doubt, and this is coming from someone who, you know, was born in 1956, you know, and there's a historical context of my lived experience, and certainly someone who lived through the worst of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Now, I was born and raised in Chicago, so I lived through the uprisings that happened in Chicago as a result of, you know, the Democratic Convention and assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and you know, John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, and all of that was a part of my lived experience. And so I say that to say this, that without a doubt, for me personally, 2020 has literally been the worst year of my life on so many levels. And having said that, the thing that I would say to this community, or these communities, quite frankly, the HIV and AIDS community, the LGBTQI community, the people of color community in general, the Black community specifically, is that we have been here before,
Right.
and we know how to get through this. We survived the Middle Passage. We survived slavery. We survived Reconstruction. We survived Jim Crow. We survived the Civil Rights Movement. And we're going to survive, the coronavirus as well. And we certainly are going to survive the Orange Menace now that is fighting to undermine our elections, fighting to steal the election, screaming and having tantrums as they drag him out of the White House. We will survive that, because that is what we do.
Right.
I remember a book that I read, and Leisha, you may remember this because I bought it for the staff at the Black AIDS Institute, that everything I ever needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. And so this is what I would say to HIV/AIDS activists and people living with HIV. Everything you need to know about how to confront the current crises we are facing as a nation and as a planet, you learned in the work you've done in HIV, and we can tick through it, that sometimes there will not be leaders and leaders will have clay feet. And that means we have to lead.
Right.
That in order to lead, that you have to understand what you are fighting, that
right.
Facts matter, science matters, organizing matters, getting up every day and taking and attempting to manifest change will bring about change. The community mobilization matters. So we actually have all of the tools we need, to confront, COVID-19, to confront the economic, catastrophe that's confronting us, to confront, all of the separateness and the hate that has permeated our public and political discourse. We know how to deal with that, and it just means drawing back, pulling on, those muscles that we developed in the fight against HIV and AIDS over what is upcoming to be 40 years.
And so, Phill, you weren't supposed to go all the way into about 2:30. You were supposed to build up, but you have just laid out, a plan and a strategy. And so many of us have said this. We have been here before. And I don't take this term lightly, because we never want to make light of mental health issues. But I can honestly say that during this COVID period, for me, it has felt like PTSD. I was young in the early 90s and seeing so many people transition from HIV, and I felt overwhelmed, and I thought I'm too young to have to experience so much death and loss around me. And as we started seeing COVID run its course, and those of us who have been impacted personally by it, that same sentiment of I've been here before continues to reoccur. Well, you started something. I want to dive right into this. You talked about the current occupant of the White House, and we know that he doesn't have to go home, but he does have to leave Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's right.
And so there will be a new administration.
Why can't I hear the fucking audio?
2021. And with the new administration, we got a new president, a new administration in the White House. What are your thoughts?
A new vice president. Let's not forget that.
And, thank you. Correct me. How could I dare leave out this historical moment of having a Black woman in the White House as our vice president. Absolutely. But what are your thoughts or your projections with this new administration as it relates to HIV?
So before we get into that, I actually want to pause for a second and for us to pay attention to what's happening right now with the insanity with the Orange Menace in the White House and what that means and what is really going on, particularly as it relates to marginalized people, Black and other people of color. So number one, no, his attempting to suck all the oxygen out of the room is an effort to distract us from an appropriate time of celebrating the historic nature of the vice president-elect. You know, that the top story in the news during this period of time should be that for the first time in the history of this country, in the years of this experiment that we call the American democracy, that we have a woman, that we have a Black person, that we have Asian person, that we have the daughter of a immigrant from the South, now as the vice president of the United States. Let's pause and know that, and let's pause and understand that part of the reason why, while Donald Trump is having a meltdown, is because there's nothing in his being that envisions the empowerment and the true engagement of people of color in that level of power. So that's point number one. Point number two, you know, when Donald Trump talks about his imaginary fraud and rigging of the election, and quite frankly, the only one who's trying to steal the election is Donald Trump. What he's talking about is what makes it a fraud is that Black people and poor people and other people of color came out in numbers and had the power to say to him, "You are fired." That is unimaginable to him. And because it is unimaginable, and the way that a psychopath and a sociopath and a white nationalist and a white supremacist sees the world, is the only way that those that he would marginalize can win is to cheat, because he has a lived experience that the only way that he has accomplished is by cheating and lying. So he assumes that that's what everyone else does when they are successful. So I just want to make a pause so that we don't lose the context of this moment. Now, moving into kind of 2021 and the new administration, I think it's critically imperative that we don't make the mistake that we made during the Obama administration. And I think that there were a number of mistakes that we made during the Obama administration. Number one, that we all had the buttons. We all saw the PSAs. We all saw the posters. We bought the books that said, "Yes, we can." And then on inauguration day, we said, "Hey, bro, go ahead and do it." And we went home and sat down. So if we are going to manifest the change that we want to see happen in this new administration, like Black women in South Africa during apartheid, we need to understand we are the ones we've been waiting for. And that, like in HIV and AIDS, nothing happens without us. Every advance involves us, and terrible things happen when we're not present. So the first thing is that this is not the Joe and Kamala show. No, this is not about who the cabinet members are. This is about all of us being there from day one and every day moving forward. Our organizing basically started on election day. And we have to continue to do that. I think with regard specifically, and I want to get to your questions. I know that I'm long-winded today, but it's been a long time. I have a lot to say.
She gonna give you that. Plenty of grace. You talk as much as you want to.
And so I think that we need to be clear about what we want to do. And I'm explicitly and intentionally talking about what we want to do during the next 4 years, during this next administration. How we are going to work with this administration to make sure that we actually create an appropriate, comprehensive response to the coronavirus pandemic, that we move and accelerate our efforts to end the AIDS epidemic in an inclusive and comprehensive way. During my time at the Black AIDS Institute, many people know that I would say regularly that AIDS in America is a Black disease. I held fast to that notion because I felt the data was behind it. That supported it, right? That clearly Black people were disproportionately impacted by HIV and AIDS in all levels. The truth of the matter is that, when I think about where we are today, I feel like I could go back and pull out of my archives many of my talks talking about HIV and AIDS and apply them to COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 in America is a Black disease that disproportionately is impacting poor people, disproportionately is impacting poor older people, disproportionately is impacting Black people, disproportionately the people who lost their jobs were Black and brown and other marginalized people, disproportionately the people who couldn't protect themselves by staying at home, at home, who were essential workers, who were risking their lives, were Black and other people of color. So in every facet, the people who have the hardest time getting masks, the people who are going to have the hardest time getting the vaccine, the people who have the hardest time getting the test, and yet the people who are working in the grocery stores and the restaurants and the delivery services that kept the rest of us alive and moving and able to stay at home and still get our paychecks, or get their paychecks. I wasn't in that group, but still get their paychecks, were Black and brown and other marginalized and poor folks. So there's no area with COVID-19 that Black and brown and other marginalized people were not negatively impacted. And so I think out of this new administration, we need to push them to do the right thing, and not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it is the smart thing to do. That the only way we're going to get out of this mess is to take care of those of us who are most impacted. So if we're talking about a new stimulus package, it has to prioritize what's happening in poor communities, what's happening in the South, what's happening among Black and brown and other people of color. Now, if we're talking about saving businesses, we have to be talking about our communities. If we're talking about resources that are going to cities, there have to be those cities where they have large populations of poor and other marginalized people. So that's on the COVID-19 front. On the HIV and AIDS front, we need to communicate strongly, unequivocally, unapologetically that we need to deal with the AIDS epidemic in an aggressive way, because that further undermines, if we do not do that, that further undermines our ability to deal with the economy. It further undermines our ability to deal with COVID-19, that our healthcare system is crumbling under the pressure of disenfranchised people not being able to get the care that they need.
Yeah. And so, Phill, I almost feel like I need to pause and pick up our first offering, because you you have delivered a word to us that some of the highlights of what I took from your comments was going to the polls was not the finale. Going to the poll was the beginning.
Absolutely.
And that there will
going to the polls what was the procession. That's what going to the polls was. So now, we need to have the service.
That's right. That's right. And so as we talk about that, and you talked about us, again, not missing this moment and ensuring that we are aggressive in getting to the end of the HIV epidemic, share with us a little bit, from your lens, then what does that look like, though? Because we've been talking about it. We've called it a lot of different things, our HIV/AIDS strategy, getting to the end of the epidemic. But when you look at the foundation of many of those tools, that the concepts are still the same, and we're still repeating and recycling this same message over and over again. So what does this aggressive approach look like through your lens moving forward in 2021?
Well, Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. And
Absolutely.
I think so. The question is, the fundamental reality is that we know more today, we know better today. And while certainly many of the concepts have been in place for a long time, fundamentally early in the epidemic, we developed what we call our response model. And there are 5 steps, you may remember this, Leisha, to the BAI model. One was raising awareness about the danger. People can't respond if they don't know that there's a danger out there, that there's something out there that can harm us. So raising awareness about that. Now, number 2, communicating that there's not hopelessness, that there's something that can be done. Some of the early failed messages were the fear tactics. Well, that is also manifests itself with COVID-19, that we spent so much time just in the fear mode without any rationalization around why do we want you to do the things we want you to do, and what are the rewards of doing those things. So the second thing after the awareness is saying that there are solutions, so there's not a hopelessness. Then the third thing is really the issue of that we actually can do the things that can be done. The truth of the matter is that while I completely understand the lockdown strategy, we all knew that there was people could only stay on lockdown for a whole host of reasons for a certain amount of time. Now, the lie that the Trump administration did was that they didn't do anything with the time that was being bought with the lockdown. So as we talk about this, we need to actually present solutions, tactics that people actually can do. And quite frankly, with COVID-19, the real solutions, have high fidelity. People can do them. Wear a mask, wash your hands, keep your hands away from your face, social distance, reduce your contact. Now, in HIV and AIDS, we understand the notion of harm reduction. The goal is not to allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. Now, are masks 100% effective? No. Is washing your hands 100% effective? No. Is social distance 100% effective? No. But the point is, what we're trying to do is harm reduction. Now, and we've seen that as an effective strategy in HIV, and we'll see it as an effective strategy in COVID-19. So, awareness, there's a problem, there's something that can be done, and you can do the thing that can be done. You have personal agency and efficacious. The next thing is actually educating people of how to use these tools, these strategies, these tactics. And then finally is the mobilization. Not finally, but then is mobilization, but then documenting and communicating the success and communicating where we are and how far we are from where we need to go. I think that's one of the areas that we have not been successful with HIV, that we've allowed people to think that we got to the finish line before we got to the finish line, because we didn't articulate that we're not where we used to be. And we're grateful for where we are, but we're not where we need to be. And so this is how we get to where we need to be. And that is necessary where we're talking about COVID-19 or whether we're talking about HIV. And then the final thing that I think is so important is resource allocation, to make sure that resources are in place, both dollars, but human resources, knowledge, Now, all of the panoply of resources that are in place where they are most needed, and so I think that you're right that some of the tools have been there, but now we need to craft those tools. We need to sharpen those tools for a time such as now.
Yes, so agree. And Phill, I think, one of the things that you bring up as a part of this conversation at looking at harm reduction strategies as it relates to COVID, these are strategies that we see that everybody can play a part in. Mm-hmm. But there are also some components that we know that are coming down the pipeline, such as vaccines, that do raise the issue around medical mistrust, specifically in Black communities. And of course, this country has given us every reason to mistrust our medical systems. So I'm going to put you on the spot. And you can punish me later for it. As it relates to vaccines, do you see yourself in a place now that if the opportunity presents itself, would you take a vaccine?
So I'll tell you, I'll answer that pretty directly. I don't feel like that's a bad place to be in. And I want to be very, very clear. If Donald Trump told me to take a vaccine, no way on earth. I don't care. Okay.
Well, I would. Right.
And I think Geraldo Rivera was like talking some crazy stuff about naming the vaccine after Trump. Now, I think that that's a disaster. That's a plan to say, let's just let COVID-19 kill us all. So, And I say that to say this, and I'm going to answer your question directly before I explain. Yes, I would take the vaccine now. And I would take the vaccine now because there are trusted messengers who have assured me that I've had conversations to assure me that the vaccine is both safe and effective. Now, yes, I would recommend that my 85-year-old father take the vaccine. But here's the deal. Even before Donald Trump undermined the vaccine efforts, and that's exactly what he did when he politicized the effort. No, that's exactly what he did when he threw the FDA under the bus. That's exactly what he did when he eviscerated or attempted to eviscerate the CDC. Both are very strong and powerful institutions that you and I and others have worked with very, very closely. Right. Okay, and that was one of the tragedies, maybe the single biggest tragedy of the last 4 years. But here's the deal. That even if all of those institutions were as strong as they were 4 years ago, we know that if the vaccines are free, if they were incentivized, and if people came to our homes, many Black people are going to be reluctant to take the vaccine. And so here's our job. All of our trusted messengers need to get the information so that they actually understand the facts. That's why we started at BAI in the early days, our HIV University, because we believe that when people understand the science of HIV, they are better equipped to make decisions for themselves that are healthy and appropriate decisions. So all of our trusted messengers need to get a PhD in this COVID-19 vaccine. And then we need to stand on the front line and talk to our folks and educate our folks about what that means. The issue around medical malpractice is really rooted in our exclusion of the process. And one of the most classic examples where you understand that is when we talk about the most classic cause of medical mistrust, and that's the Tuskegee trial, the Tuskegee syphilis trial. Now, there's a large group of people, Black people, who know that there's something happened, that there's this thing called the Tuskegee syphilis trial, but they know nothing about it. And so there's mistrust, and we're prone for conspiracy theories about that. there's a second group of people, and they probably are the largest group of people, who believe that what the Tuskegee syphilis trial was is that they gave Black men syphilis. When in fact, what happened is that they withheld treatment.
Treatment, right.
That's right. And so actually the model to replicate Tuskegee is for Black people not to get the vaccine. The model to replicate Tuskegee is for Black people not to get HIV treatment. So part of what we need to do is we need to talk about the true nature of the areas that were medical malpractice and the root of medical mistrust happened. Now, Tuskegee was just one example. There's a long history of reasons why we should be suspicious. The other issue that we need to be clear about is that our medical mistrust is broader than that. It is really rooted in a mistrust of systems, whether they're medical or not, that historically have mistreated us. And so that's why it's important for those of us, and one of the reasons why I am excited about this point in time is that I think that we need to be in the weeds of the vaccine development and the reviewing of the efficacies of the vaccine. Now, we need to be checking to see how many volunteers in the trials were part of our community. If those numbers are insufficient, we need to make sure that there's post-approval trials that that include us in a robust way, if that did not happen moving forward. And we need to be the ones that are talking about and writing about the vaccine in our communities. And most importantly, the people who are delivering vaccines need to be knowledgeable people who look like us and have a shared lived experience. Now, and especially the shared lived experience, because as they say, not all of our skin folks are our kin folks. And so the shared lived experience, right? So I am very optimistic about the vaccine. But the other thing that we need to be cautious about when we talk about vaccines is really going back to, we can't wait for the cavalry. That this strategy around looking for the silver bullet does not serve us well. That if our experience in America has taught us nothing, it is a mistake to wait for them to send the lifeboats for us. That between now and when we have a robust vaccine distribution system, we need to make sure that we do what we can do so that we survive, just like we did in the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, before anybody was giving any Black people any money. There were those of us who were working out of our bedrooms and our living rooms, out of the back of our cars, that said that if nobody else is going to care, I'm going to care. And that really has to be the position we take now.
Right. And thank you for sharing that. And that's one of the reasons, Phill, why my signature on my email has been the same for nearly 20 years, and that history will record our commitment to stop the spread of HIV. We don't always, our story doesn't always make it to the big screen. And when we talk about HIV history, with the exception of the Black AIDS Institute, nobody really tells our story. It's framed as if we have always been the recipient of services, and they don't tell the story about the pioneers in the movement that look like us, that were committed to serve our communities before there were resources. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you to come down south for just a minute. I know folks know you live on the West Coast, and everybody just heard you talk about being from Chicago. And I think there's only one part of Chicago, because it seems like everybody's from the south side of Chicago. But I do know that you've got family roots in Mississippi, and those who are on the line from Mississippi, let Phill know that he has some home support on the webinar today. But when we think about HIV in Black communities, we know that where the majority of Black folks live, it's in the South. Where we see the largest percentage of HIV cases among Black populations, it's in the South. But we also see where the fewer percentage of PrEP users are is in the South. So we're looking at, where the epidemic is and who is accessing the prevention tools. They don't match up.
That's right.
They don't match up. And so just share with us, because so many of us who are on the webinar today are from the Southeast. Just kind of share with us your thoughts on moving forward in 2021, making some strides in terms of forward movement against some of those outcomes that are not favorable for us.
Yeah, that's right. Well, one of the biggest elephants in the room when we talk about the Southern epidemic, whether we're talking about the HIV/AIDS pandemic or whether we're talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, is how the healthcare infrastructure, to the degree that it existed, and let us be clear that the healthcare infrastructure in the southeast part of the United States has always been inadequate, and it has been decimated over the last 50 plus years. Both by economic reasons, and then over time, kind of the political and the pervasive racist policies that exist. So if we're going to get serious about solving either of these problems, we really have to pay attention to building the infrastructure. Now, and I mean infrastructure with a capital I. I mean hospital systems. People should not have to drive 80 to 100 miles to find a comprehensive hospital to serve them, or a hospital system to serve them. So we need to invest in that kind of infrastructure. At the same time, I think, or maybe even before that, or while that's going on, we need to deal with maximizing technology. Now, and I think, I happen not to be one of those silver lining kind of guys, or maybe I am and I don't want to be a silver lining kind of a guy. But I think that one of the things that we've learned over the last 10 months is the efficacy of technology and telemedicine and what have you. I know that in my own healthcare, the vast majority of my healthcare over the last 10 months has been via telemedicine. For my mental health, and my meeting with my therapist, and I'm deliberately disclosing that I'm seeing a therapist because I think that that's something that Black people need to take seriously during this time. That's done either on FaceTime or Zoom or a telephone call. Even my physical exams with my doctor, my quarterly updates with my doctor for my HIV, are done on FaceTime. Now, if there's an actual procedure that needs to be done, a lot of the prep, my doctor or the nurse practitioners talk me through many of the things that I would normally not do until I actually got to the facility. So I think that technology can be very useful. Now, of course, that means we need to talk about the information highway and equal access to bandwidth and all those kinds of things. But I think that one of the biggest drivers of the epidemic in the South is a lack of medical infrastructure. And then that is compounded and exacerbated by a heightened level of burden that disenfranchises people based on race and sexual orientation and class and socioeconomic status.
Yeah. And all of those things, like as you've mentioned, speak to the infrastructure on how we access healthcare. And this region of the country has had the poorest healthcare infrastructure since slavery. So this isn't new, but really looking at ways and strategies how we are able to help and support our own community. So Phill, we got about 10 minutes or so left, and I know that this weekend, when folks heard that you were doing this webinar for the Emory COMPASS program, folks asked, is he coming out of retirement? That's why we listed as, don't call it a comeback. He's still been supporting folks in the movement and sharing his wisdom, but you get this exclusive right now. Share with us. Is this just a one-time thing, or do we got access to the great Phill Wilson again? What's happening after World AIDS Day?
Well, you know, one of the things my mom said to me before she passed in July was to remind me of our obligations, you know, and we are at a moment in time right now. And many of us who have done HIV work over the years develop skills and knowledge, and many of those skills, and that knowledge can be useful right now. So I've been thinking about it, and I believe there are things that I have learned over the years that might possibly be useful at this moment in time. So I have decided that there is a second act, or maybe if I'm more accurate, you know, a third act or a fourth act, you know, given my age. But I think that there are ways that I can contribute, and I am actively and aggressively both looking for ways that I can contribute and open to respond to inquiries about ways that I can contribute. So I guess the bottom line is that I'm very interested in advising and doing consulting work and project work for folks who feel like my lived experience and my knowledge might be useful to them.
Well, you already know that's music to my ears. You have been, for us, one of the greatest, if not the greatest champion for HIV for Black America. There has been a sense of pride from your development of the Black AIDS Institute that made us feel as if we had a home, a place, something that was our own, and a team that was advocating for us. And to know that the visionary is back in swing is exciting news to me. So you all heard it here. This was the exclusive that Phill Wilson is available. I see folks already saying, yeah, come to Atlanta. We need you in Atlanta. Mississippi is on in full force. They come to the home state. So sounds like there's some buzz generating for having you back with us. And so, Phill, any final thoughts of wisdom that you want to share with us on today? I will say that you have given us a lot to ponder on. I will definitely be watching this webinar again, because many tools that you talked about that even on an individual level, not just as you're connected to a health department or organization, but there are things that as individuals that we can do to help in this forward movement. But I want to give you an opportunity for any final thoughts. And I don't want to forget this. So now Texas and Florida said, don't leave them out. You're welcome. They need you there too. So not just Atlanta and Mississippi. We see you, Texas. We see you, Florida. But yes, any final thoughts?
Well, you know, I think that my final thoughts take me back to some of the things that I always hold on to when I think about my work. Now, and that I would share with us at this moment in time. And the one is, Audre Lorde, when she said, when we speak, we are afraid, our words will not be heard nor welcome. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So we might as well speak, remembering that we were never meant to survive. And isn't that our story? Now, we weren't meant to thrive, but here we are. And and we now have sent the Orange Menace packing because we spoke. Now, and we stood in the lines, and we wouldn't let anyone turn us away. And that's very powerful. And I think that that really has been our way forward, and that's going to be our way forward.
Well, Phill, there really is nothing left to say after that. Thank you so much for being our speaker on today. I feel motivated. I feel inspired. I cannot walk away from this webinar without letting you know I see Kansas, Nebraska. I think I saw Africa. Just a whole host of people who are watching, who are saying we need you in those places. And so I really hope that, actually, I think you even are getting an invite for a date. That's why I can't take you nowhere. I'm trying to keep it professional, and this is turning into the love connection. But but I really hope that you feel that sense of how much we love you and celebrate you, and we're so glad to know that we now have access to your wisdom and to your knowledge and expertise, and that you freely will share that with us. And I also want to thank Nina Smith Bankhead and Darian Bannister for giving me the opportunity to share this time and space with you. There were moments I thought everybody had left, and I was just soaking up all of this knowledge and wisdom from you. And so I thank the Emory Compass Center for allowing me this space to have this conversation with you. And so Darian wants me to remind everyone, I think, to make sure that you complete your evaluation. And Darian, how long will it take for the recording of today's webinar to be available?
Give us about a week, and I think we will have the recording available. And I'll definitely make sure that you all will be able to see this. It'll be located on our website, also on our YouTube page. Please make sure you're following all of us. Shameless plug, Be Our Compass, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and share all of your thoughts on this webinar. And once again, thank you to my personal hero, Mr. Phill Wilson, who he probably is my personal hero, but he's been my hero for years. And I thank you, Mother Leisha Beach, for just being who you are and being the moving spirit and guiding light today. Like, you just know how to make us all feel good.
Aw, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And, today's title was New Hope, and I do hope that you felt inspired and new hope and new vision as we move forward to 2021. Well, this concludes today's webinar. Continue to participate in World AIDS Day activities that will go on throughout the week. And thank you so much for sharing this time and space with us.
Thank you. So, are you still